Today we're going to be talking about SQL Server and Power BI. If you're tuning in hoping for a SQL video, don't worry, another one's coming. But today we're talking about Power BI and SQL Server. And we're talking about something that I think a lot of you know pretty intuitively. And that's that you can execute more than a query in the query box when refreshing data out of a SQL Server in Power BI. So here we are in SQL Server. And as you can see, I have a stored procedure that returns 1 that's called dbo.test. So just to show you, when I execute it, here it is returning the value 1. Now, if I go into a new Power BI file, I go get data from SQL Server, and then I give it my local host /SQL Express. And then go into advanced options and type in exe dbo .test, right? What you'll see is that when I run this, and it'll need a database, so I'll need to give it SQL practice, right? When I run this, it takes that stored procedure perfectly happily. As long as it returns data, you can put pretty much anything that you want in there. So for example, here I've got a second stored procedure, right, that drops a table and then creates a table. And I've called it test2, okay? I went ahead and I put that into this Power Query. And if you look, you'll see here I am executing that table executing that stored procedure that's dropping the table and then recreating it. And then I'm just selecting the value 1. And Power BI takes that perfectly happily. So what is the use case in this, you might be wondering? Well, I've used this functionality for 2 really good use cases in the past. The first time is I had a table or a query that was constantly failing, but when I opened it up on SQL Server and ran it, it would run fine in seconds. So what I did is I put the query in the stored procedure and then had the stored procedure log when it started running and finished running. As a result, when Power BI tried to start refreshing its entire semantic model at 1 a.m., I would know exactly when this problem table in the semantic model started refreshing and then when it finished or didn't finish. Now, speaking of not finishing, the other thing that I used this tool for, or this feature for, was essentially putting my code in try and catch statements. So if I had code that was failing intermittently, or maybe there were locking errors of the table I was trying to query, I would put my select in a try statement, and then I would have a catch statement that if it failed would essentially return 1 to Power BI and then log a more detailed error message into SQL Server. So this was really great because when the report failed, it would essentially just blank itself out, and I would immediately get emails and be very aware and my attention would be drawn to it. But then I could also go in and I could look at the message that the catch statement logged, which would typically be much more detailed than an error message you would get through like the Power BI front end web UI. So have you ever used this feature of Power BI? If you have, let me know how down in the comments. And if you're interested in learning more about SQL or business intelligence, consider checking out some of my other videos or subscribing. I make a lot of videos on Power BI and SQL. I'm made a lot more on Power BI, but I'm currently making a Learn SQL for Free video series where I'm teaching you SQL from the ground up. And no, I promise I'm not trying to sell you my course or my consulting services. I'm just making these videos for the love of the game. And with that, thank you for tuning in, and thank you for spending, this 5 minutes with me. I hope you learned something.